All righty. People, welcome back to our channel. We have one less person as Gary is living a much better life than us right now in France. So Gary is not with us, but Gary will be back with us on episode 4. So tonight is going to be a little bit different. I am handing over the host duties to JY as JY has a topic that is important to him, something that he values, that he feels is a really important topic for us to discuss. So without further ado, JY, lead us off and tell us some good things.
All right. Geez, the pressure's on. Well, what I wanted to talk about is something that, and it's an opinion of mine. It's something I mentioned in I think our first recording was that we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So all my opinions are formed based on something I've learned from somewhere else. And that's why this topic, I always ask people, have you read these books before they give me pushback? And I want to talk about the idea that natural born talent doesn't exist, that you don't wake up with the ability to do anything, right? Everything has to be learned. Everything has to be taught, but everything can also be taken away from you if things are done the wrong way, right? It takes a deliberate and purposeful practice to put together what some would consider great athletes, great champions, great chess players, great musicians, right? No one is woken up with that talent, and I think one of the things that, and if you read these books, right, the Art of Impossible, Peak, Mindset, Outliers, I'm sure I'm missing another one. Like these people have done research for decades, figuring out what's the process to make someone great at anything. And they figured out that there's a pretty consistent formula along the way, right? And that's where I think too many people, they confuse what they think is talent, which is what I believe is actually passion combined with hard work, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, well, not to me, but what everyone is saying, and Anders Ericsson, a former professor at Florida State who passed away, I think last year, he hit one of the things he wrote in his book was that talent is just potential created through work, right? So if you don't work, then there's no talent, right? And I think that's just something that we can bring along to kids because, and I think especially for parents too, and coaches, and a lot, and it's changed the way I've looked at things. The way I look at kids is the ones who have made it very far in anything, and this is the two things that are completely underestimated is the passion they have for what they're doing enables them to focus and pay attention in a way that is on a completely different level than someone who isn't enjoying what they're doing. You can be working hard physically, but mentally, when you love what you're doing and you combine with how hard you're working, that's where you get the real improvements. That's where you get the real gains. That's where you get that level of focus that's something you can't teach, right? I give the example of you can't teach someone wanting to win 14 Grand Slams, 14 French Opens, right? At what point, is enough? But there's a desire in Nadal, there's a desire in Novak, there's a desire in Federer that is beyond anything anyone can comprehend. And they're willing to go through so much pain, so much suffering. That's not talent, right? That's skill level produced through so much focused work, so much intentional work that most of us can't even fathom it, right? But I think something else that, they make it look easy, but it's thousands upon thousands of practice, fitness, stretching, analysis. And I think, too many people think oh, well, Federer was still be Federer. I'm like, well, no. If you give him a bad coach when he was young, that bad coach could have just sucked the passion out of tennis and he wouldn't play anymore, right? Yeah. The reason he was able to, we all know through the struggles he had with his attitude and throwing his rackets when he was 14, 15, he's very open about that. It's great. If he didn't love the game as much as he did and didn't have the right people around him at that time, he wouldn't have pushed through, right? It would have fallen apart, right? There's no amount of talent that would have gotten him through those moments if he didn't have the right environment around him. And
Yeah.
the one thing I do recognize, and I want to get your guys' thoughts too, and
Oh, I'm ready.
is you can be born with physical advantages, right?
Yeah.
You can be born 6'2" versus 5'1", right? Of course, like to that extent, but you can still be an amazingly great tennis player or athlete within your physical capabilities, right? And there's who knows what that limitation is until you go through it, right? And we know, like, look
100%.
at Schwartzman, right? I mean, the amount of passion he has in the work he puts in. And then finally, the last piece, which I do recognize, is the environment and the resources you're born into, right? You can obviously be born into a situation where your family or has the financial resources that make it easier for you to practice this much.
Yep.
So that is there, but everything else, without it, you can have financial resources and physical capabilities, but without all the other stuff, you're still not going to make it.
Well, Pat might be thinking differently because he is a natural born talent and specimen of
You're talented. I never worked a day in my
life.
Wins came easy, man. Where you just came out with a banger of an intro. So how do we?
Well, and I'll leave one.
Where do
one
we
final...
start here, Pat?
Well, if I could be devil's advocate for just a second here.
You beat me to it.
Yeah, just to fully go through this idea. You're not saying the hard work is kind of evenly distributed based on results, are you? Like there are different advantages people have with. So talent alone doesn't win matches, of course. I think we all agree. But
up to a certain level.
Up to a certain level.
Up to a certain level. But also there are characteristics that make things easier for certain people. Just to develop quicker, to get to certain levels, everything like that. Like you said, the genetic advantages, disadvantages. There's also mental advantages, disadvantages. I agree with you 100% that your passion and the hard work is the number one talent. Like I would call that a talent. We've all seen the guys that have a little bit of early success pretty easily who don't really want it, and they all fizzle out. The guys with the passion that keep progressing, whatever, it kind of doesn't really matter what their talent level was. It's whoever kind of just sticks with it and keeps working hard tends to have that progression. But I just wanted to ask Jay why Nadal, Federer aren't necessarily the hardest working people out there. They are some of the hardest working people, but I think there are lower ranked guys that work equally as hard as them, but they're just different factors in their development that cause them to be at a different place.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I think is very important. I think it's a little unfair, and I use those examples of those three players because it's very easy. We can all see their success, but you can be incredibly successful just being a Division I athlete, right?
Okay,
so I don't want to say that like the only way you were rewarded for all your work is, if everything connects, you're going to win 20 Grand Slams. Like that's what I'm saying. There's things that happen once you win and the hard work connects that you don't know how a player is going to react. You don't know how a player is going to handle the stress, the traveling, the pressure, because they're at some point, like you play in a big stage, you feel a little pressure. How do you talk yourself out of it? You don't know how an individual is going to handle that. And you never know until they show up. Now, they were able to figure it out and things worked out for them. But I think one of the things that helped them a lot too is if you look at all the work that they put in, and you talk about these juniors that fizzle out at some point, there's still thousands of hours of practice when they first started playing tennis, right? Depending on what age we're talking about, but there's still an incredible amount of work of these kids until they fizzle out, right? Where they were practicing. They didn't wake up and just like they had better volleys and forehands than anything else, right? For that time being that they first started playing, they were totally engaged. They had a coach that was putting them in a good environment, and that environment worked for them, right? And that environment might not work for other players because their personality doesn't fit. And I think that's just, there's a lot of luck that goes into it too, right? You know, who your first coach is, who your second coach is. You try things, what your personality is. There's a lot of luck that goes into it, right? But you still have to put yourself in that environment and try and then keep going. But until they fizzle out, there's still a lot of practice that went into it. And then what we've all seen, or at least I've felt, is that when they start to not handle the pressure well, when they finally start to lose and they don't have a good support system, then they start to fizzle out by being like, well, tennis just isn't for me. You know,
So I got I guess more maybe like topic discussions for you guys to answer. I got my opinion on a couple of things where, so what do we say to, we're separating ultimately, right? We're separating characteristics and things that you're born with, right? Because I'm tall, so I have an advantage being, you know, almost 6'4". But what do we separate talent versus, because obviously there's people who are naturally born, like I'm a very athletic person. Like I was the kid in gym class in school that I was always the last one, like, you know, in dodgeball.
well, but I got
Thing.
a question for you, Chris. So Chris, did your parents have you do anything when you were growing up? Do you have any older siblings or friends that you were just running around the backyard throwing stuff, just like
I was an
active,
80s, I was an 80s baby, so I was in the backyard every day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, I mean, do you think you would have still been that same person being athletic if you just played video games till you're 12 years old?
Probably not.
Right. I mean, so like it also doesn't have to be, and they found this out with like a lot of athletes. There's been research that goes into this where it might not have been that one sport, but they were out there learning to run, learning hand-eye coordination, learning how to comprehend what's going on, how to think, how to work things through. And they play multiple sports, and then they maybe combine all those skills when they finally get into tennis, you know, but things were done early that made that kid athletic. If that kid didn't do anything until they were 10, you now don't have an athletic child, right? They don't just wake up and, oh my gosh, he knows how to run at 10.
So do you think, so do you think that everybody, this actually be a really good question. I think it's a good question, but do you think everybody is kind of starting from, do you think everybody starts from the same starting point? Or do you think some people start with a better advantage than others? Like, did you ever see, there's a really, really good video where everybody was on a starting line and then the guy was like, take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a mom and a dad, right? And it was like, take 3 steps forward if you had an education. And then it was like, everybody's going to start the race. Everybody starts a race at a different point, but it all comes down to how you use it. Did you guys ever see that video?
Yeah.
It's so, I think it's so good. So how do we compare something like that, right? Are there, I think we can all agree that there are advantages and disadvantages to somebody becoming maybe more successful, but I mean, maybe that's a different topic, or is that connected to just saying, you can't just outright say this person is a natural born talent versus somebody else, because everybody has the same starting line, but maybe, you know, it's like, well, what separated Fed, Novak, and Nadal? Did they make better choices in their career so they got to a certain place? Maybe they invested their money into their career differently, or they brought on more coaches early on, or, you know, if somebody, you know, if you look at like, I mean, how many juniors were, I mean, even maybe with you guys, right? It's like you guys probably played against some really good people as juniors that might have made it to top 50. So it's like, why did that person go further than this person type thing? Is it because they're talented? Is it because they worked harder? Is it, I think that's kind of where your whole the whole thing we're talking about is what you're stating.
Well, you know, I think a lot of right now, like, you know, if you look at a lot of our NBA and NFL players, right, a lot of them come from poverty, right? But
yeah, they're hungry.
They're hungry, but also sports is their way out.
Yeah.
Right. Their education system isn't great. So from the time they're extremely young, they're out in the yard playing sports. And it might not even be organized, but from the time that they're so little, they're throwing, running, kicking, running around, like, because, you know, that's all they can do. And like everyone knows, like, all right, this is our best chance to get out, or at least that's their thought process. So from the time they're so little, they're learning to be an athlete now, but it's fun time for them, right? But everyone is so focused. So they're out there for hours just being an athlete, learning.
Yeah.
Right. Where a lot of our kids now, like, okay, they'll do their hour and a half of tennis and they'll go play Fortnite, you know, or TikTok for like 3 hours. But these people who really love what they're doing, like, they're literally just going to play 5 hours straight of basketball or tennis. You have to pry them off the court because they love what they're doing. And then they put them in an environment where it allows them to flourish.
Yeah. Pat, what are you thinking, buddy?
Two things. I think talent, the word talent needs to be defined in this conversation, because
I'm going to Google what talent is defined at.
Because that luck you talked about, JY, about the making maybe some lucky decisions in the beginning, that could almost be chalked up to talent to a degree. Being active with your friends and being athletic and everything, yeah, that's the nature versus nurture argument. I mean, you could make an argument that there is a percentage on both sides, nature and nurture. It seems like you're leaning hard, like 99-100% nurture. Like, if you nurture your abilities, you can, you know, be the best ever.
Well, not best ever. I just think you don't know your limit.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying. You're not limited, and you don't know, and you can go really far.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So
I have the definition, Pat.
Go ahead.
It says it's a natural aptitude or skill is what talent is a natural aptitude or skill.
So natural.
Like, so when I hear natural, to me is like you were born with it.
Another one.
Like your height is something to me that's natural. Like, you have no control over it. Right. So you're just naturally your size. Right. But someone's math skills, if you stop learning math, you're only going to know up to a certain level of math. Right. You have to continue to grow and then if you hate what you're doing, you're going to stop.
IQ.
Then
natural, right?
Is IQ natural? Are there people who are more, I mean, but then I think that falls back into the whole thing of characteristics and traits that you're born with.
Yeah. I
mean,
we
all are
difficult hands you can be dealt, and you can still, you know, outwork your limitations, so to speak. I mean, Steve Prefontaine was a great example of that. If you guys have read any of his biographies or watched his movies or anything, the guy that, I think he's like the first guy to run like a 4-minute mile. He was genetically not predisposed to running. His legs were different lengths and everything, but he was just an absolute workhorse. So I would describe his work ethic as his number one talent or trait, where some people's size and strength can be their number one talent and trait. And I think it's just using using whatever you have. I think you can be dealt a pretty crap hand and still go farther than you think. But I also think there's, you know, there are things that make things easier, you know, make things harder. There's a reason most guys in the top 100 are 6 foot or taller. You know, it's tough out there being our height, JY.
Yeah, no, I mean, imagine if we were Chris's height.
Yeah, you know, would easily be top 10.
Yeah, and imagine if I started playing tennis at 4.
Well, no, seriously,
13.
I mean,
a lot of what ifs.
There's so many what ifs. 100%.
You could also break it down. There are other theories out there about what is free will and decision making as well. You know, your decisions a lot of times are the things that have happened to you over the course of time, and you're almost predetermined to make your decisions. So there's some books by Sam Harris. He's a neurobiologist who talks about these kinds of things. And in that world, I mean, you can make a valid argument that you're not really making decisions. Your decisions are made for you based on things that have happened to you throughout your life. And in that case, it's, you know, everything's kind of talent, you know, or lucky, or not talent and lucky. You know, it depends how you look at it.
Well, and I think you know, it's people. I mean, I would like it if people didn't define as like you're only talented if you were a top 10 professional athlete in your own respective sport.
Yeah,
Like that's such an unfair thing to say. Like you're only talented if you were as good as one of the best and the best of the best in the world. Like
I agree.
You know, you can be extremely successful, like I mentioned, like just being a collegiate athlete, or just in so many other ways, or you know, in your own job and your own things.
Legend.
So it's yeah. So I think, you know, you can be a great, you know, gamer now. I mean, that's a legit thing, right? So I think too many times people will look at a pathway for a child and already label them like, no, like, you know, you're just not going to be as good as that. Like, you don't know, right? You don't know what happens if you somehow get lucky with the right coach at the right time, you know, and you give them a chance. And then all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, like they're in love with what they're doing. And then they focus to a level that they never focused in anything, right? I mean, there's kids who they struggle to stay awake at school, but somehow can play Fortnite for 17 hours in a row, right? They love what they're doing playing these video games, and they're going to lock in and focus. And I think it's great that there's a way for them to make money now doing it, because you know what? Like they're so good at what they're doing. But if they never would have done that, right, then that people would just say, oh, they can't focus. They're just not born with this ability to focus. But you put them on something they love and they turn into a completely different person.
That is true. Jay, I just want to mention that you've mentioned Fortnite a few times, and I'm
getting into the metaverse thing. So like, sorry, man, I'm really
I personally love Fortnite.
Me too. I've been playing crazy the last couple of weeks since the new map came out.
Look, I've never played Fortnite. You know, I've watched Fritz play Fortnite and all these guys play Fortnite.
It's so much fun.
Why almost go pro in gaming? Somebody just told me that today.
That who did?
Riley almost went pro in gaming.
No, definitely not. He is not a gamer. Definitely not.
Thank you. I'm gonna call out this kid.
So this really isn't. It's a really interesting topic, right? Because you do see a lot of people say, oh, this person is more, you know, I think if we come to a conclusion on this, right, where it's like, okay, well, some, you know, how many times, I mean, how often do you hear that? Oh, this person is really naturally talented. So it's like, you wouldn't say, we're not going to say naturally talented. We're more going to say, do they have greater gifts that allow them to be, I'm trying to word this properly to kind of like,
or
you know, does somebody have greater gifts than, like, if somebody's like Shaquille O'Neal, right? Is Shaquille O'Neal great at basketball because of his height, or did he have to practice and get the reps in to learn how to manage that? Or like another good example, I don't know if you guys know my buddy Alex Hunt. Shout out to Alex Hunt. I don't know if you guys know him, but he tennis player. He, you know, had an ATP ranking, and he had one arm. And really cool story. And so he actually shared something really cool where he was like, they're like, oh, well, you know, don't you feel like you have a limitation? He was like, I was born like this. I don't know what it's like to play tennis with two arms. He was like, this is what I have. And it worked. And I became a professionally ranked tennis player, and I have one arm. So when you say, I'm limited. He's like, no, I'm not. I was always born like this. So I knew this is what I had. And I learned how to master a skill having one arm. So yeah, I
So
mean, I guess
I
it's how you use, and then kind of, I guess to favor what you're saying, JY, it really comes down to how you use what you are born with, right? It does take the practice. It does take the reps, putting in the time, maximizing your skill set, and going from there.
So I want to propose this like kind of situation that I came across with this player I'm working with. I won't mention their name. Hopefully they're okay with me giving this example. But so, I started working with them recently, and footwork is an issue, right?
Mhm.
For their age. They're just they're not fast. They're not light on their feet, and it just seemed like it was being chalked up as like this person's choosing not to move their feet because it's like, it's effort. But everything else we were working on technically, doing everything else, they would do it, right? So then I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I don't have to like push them really hard to make these other things. So I'm like, well, what if this person was never trained to run fast, sprint, change directions? What's the footwork? Boom, just how to be light on your feet and just do it nonstop and develop the muscle memory, like for your footwork as you do for technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I asked that person, has anyone specifically just worked with you on this? And they said, no, not really. They just simply say, move your feet.
Yeah.
So is this person naturally just not a good mover, or are they not trained? Versus, and I'll give you a second example. I hit with this 9-year-old kid once, and I know the coach. So I know everything they've been working on for 3 years since he was 6 years old. Kid never stopped moving his feet. From the second we started, just wouldn't stop moving for the first 15 minutes. It was incredible. Well, I asked the coach, he's like, yeah, that's everything we worked on. So is one kid just lucky and this coach is lucky that he found this one kid that moves his feet? Or was this something that was one person had to train and the other person not trained?
Yeah.
And then what if I took that mindset on this player I'm working with now and just said, you know what, they're not a mover. I'm just going to have to teach them how to hit big from the center of the court and just give them massive power. Put a Babolat in their hand and swing away.
Yeah. Well, that comes down to now it's, this makes us all think, right? Because now we're thinking about our players and you're like, is that a reflection of me, or is it something that, now that's another good topic, right? Is my player a certain way as a reflection of me and what I've done and developed with them? Or is it a reflection of their lack of effort or commitment, or that's where it becomes, or passion. Now that's where it becomes interesting, right? Where it's, who are they as a person? Because I know that there's the players that I work with, I like, I know the things that are important to me that I want to develop and that I think are key things to develop with players. But then it's like, how much of that is a representation of me versus how much of it is a representation of their lack of effort or their lack of passion or care? Because I know what they should be doing, but if they're not doing it, how much of that is me versus how much of that is them? That would be a very interesting conversation for us to have.
How much of it is their personality, and also at what age do you kind of set that game style? Like, at what age do you say, hey, take a Babolat, swing big? You obviously didn't work the first 10 years of your life on coordination drills with your feet and quick steps. Like, at what point do you
never get a Babolat? That's so come on.
I agree, but
oh, you never get a Babolat.
the like strengths and weaknesses of the player, like you make a very good point about the young age development. Like, I mean, the book Talent Code is really good about that as well. But like, chasing after friends and blah 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 blah. But if you didn't have that, and you're, let's say, 8 years old, or let's say you're 12 years old, and you don't have the foot coordination and mobility, is there a way to get you as good as those kids that have been doing it since they were 4? Or do you have to say, you're a little behind the curve, we can work at it as best as we can, but we're going to have to structure your game style this way to make you a successful player?
Yeah, I mean,
or
I'd say,
are they a natural talent like Pat Dasick?
I
and
don't
he's
think
just a naturally great mover.
everyone says.
But
Oh,
it's funny though, but it's so good though, because if you look, like, if we look at this, like, we are literally agreeing with the whole, I mean, if you, all the things that we're saying, we're validating, JY, what you said at the very beginning of this, 20 minutes ago, of like, we're validating the things that you're saying, right? Because we're coming up with all of this, and this is why this conversation is fun, is because we're coming up with all of these things that define what makes a player great. And we're not sitting here saying, oh yeah, this person's because they're a natural talent, right? It's like, if we think of, I mean, anybody watching this, like, if you think of their skill set, it's like, oh, is this person a good artist because they have a better eye? It's like, no, they've been like, this is where it's interesting. And JY, this is where you're making my mind really turn. It's like, no, they're not good at drawing stuff because it's just they're talented at that. They've probably been doodling on a paper and they were coloring books when they were 2. So, drawing stuff on a piece of paper was, normal to them as a young kid. It's always, it's interesting that you put it that way, because then I think of my childhood and I think about all the things that I did and what made me good at sports, or even, not even sports related, but also what made me the person that I am today too, is from those experiences.
Well, and let's take a later example of an athlete who developed a skill later. Okay, LeBron James, when he first came into the league, what did you do? You let him shoot. You just don't let him drive, right? I mean, his 3-point shooting and his jump shooting wasn't great. And you now look at his shooting percentages, and they've gotten up dramatically since he was in the league, since he was already #1 draft pick, right? Since he had already won championships, right? He's only gotten better later in his life. But I bet you if you would have gone back at his age, his first couple of years in the league, people would say, well, he's just not naturally a good shooter. He's just a person who drives. Well, what did he do? He spent hours making his game better.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like, yeah, I mean, like Curry, he's a naturally good shooter. That dude has been,
come on.
Yeah, I mean, that's just you're not, yeah. No, I after this whole conversation, it's, I mean, we're agreeing with this whole thing. And I think
still agree.
You disagree?
I mean, I agree 90%, but I do think there is, and I think it's just a definition thing on that natural development. I think, like, if you're a baby and you're like hitting something in front of you with your hand and nobody's around, I think that's considered natural development. I think that gives you a naturally trained talent, that once you have this hand-eye coordination, and it's like, oh, the parent's like, oh, I didn't do anything with his baby. And it's like, oh, there was a, I don't know.
So Pat, are you saying that when you were a baby, you were just already hitting?
No, I mean, I got the reps.
He was slapping forehands at
He was
6
slapping
months old.
forehand.
I got the reps, and I think I put in a ton of hard work, and I don't see myself as having made it in the sport, because I didn't get to a top 100 level, which I guess it also depends where you set that bar, because I mean, to some people I made it because I was a D1 player, and I got professionally ranked, and had a ranking for like 10 years, but then other people will look at it and just be like, oh, well, how many millions of dollars did you make playing?
But that's this country. I'm sorry, but that's the United States of America, where they only look at stuff with dollar signs, and it's an absolute joke, right? It just ticks me off.
It's
because
every tennis announcer at Grand Slams talking trash about the 16 seed in the U.S. Open, saying he's lucky to be on court with Nadal. It's just
it's John McEnroe. It's John McEnroe. Let's just put it. It's John.
It's all of them. It's John, but it's also all of them.
Yeah, well, because but look, if you look at
why is it that I love it.
Why is it that like the Europeans are making it so much, like that they make it more than the Americans?
That should be our next episode.
They have better tournament schedules. You can get a car and drive to every tournament in Europe. I got to drive to California and drive 24 hours.
But they're making the same amount of money, right? They're playing for the same prize money we are, and they stay out there longer because to them, if they can even come close to breaking even if they're losing, they're willing to live with their parents because they love what they're doing. Like to them,
Any
being a
tournament.
professional tennis player, no one asked them like, oh, well, how much money are you making? Like to them, like it's a prideful thing in South America and in Europe to be chasing your dream. It's not a prideful thing to be like, well, how much money are you making? Oh, well,
Well,
your friend's a lawyer now,
I
so you
I have
know you should quit.
so this might have to be for another episode, which I
Sorry,
think
I
would be
ranted.
great.
Sorry.
No, no, you're great. But I think this is really, but this to me, it's what's interesting is that everything we're discussing does go back to that whole natural talent, right? It's not that there's natural talent. When you look at the success of European athletes, right, in tennis versus American, I have, from my experiences that I've had, when you start in American sports as a kid, or even in tennis, and you look at tennis facilities, they're not looking at it as, oh, here's athletes, we want to develop them and improve them. It's like, how do we maximize the square footage of a court and make the most money possible? But then you also look at certification processes. The US is laughed at for becoming certified as a USPTA pro,
The
right?
weekend test.
When you look at, yeah, it's like you're literally paying for a piece of paper. And that's not me, I guess maybe it is being, well, I guess it is being critical of the process, but it's like people are just are given that, right? You haven't really respectfully earned that. You just got a piece of paper that says you're certified and that you can now go and coach, and you're considering yourself a professional coach. And but then it just sets a really poor standard. And then you
So
look at
that's right.
these
Think of
kids
how
at a
many
young
players.
age.
Imagine if you're a coach, like if you're a player and you usually go to your local coach, the person closest to you to first start, right? Your parents not going to drive an hour for
No,
your first tennis lesson. So imagine this person is your coach who just got this weekend test and has no idea what they're doing, but your
yeah,
parents don't know any better. Well,
correct,
that's your environment. That's your
correct.
experience. You know,
I no,
so
I agree, but I think it's a great point, right? Because but then, but then you look at everybody's given an award, right? You participated, you did great. Here's a trophy. I have a feeling that kids aren't getting participation trophies in Russia.
yeah. I mean,
Like
or
also,
Argentina or
this is where we need Gary, right? Because then
yeah,
he could tell us. But like that's not happening. So that goes back to at these young ages, you know, I think this is where things get interesting, right? Because I think I got fortunate with the people who were in my life. And I think you even said like Federer was like, I was lucky that I had such a great coach developing, me as a young kid. And I think about people, I had a phenomenal coach, soccer coach when I was younger. The guy was this guy was great, Danny. I mean, the things he said to me as an 8, 9-year-old kid, probably till this day scarred me, but did not let us get away with anything. He made us work so hard. We maximized every minute of practice. He cared so much. And I learned a lot though from that, where like I learned that, mediocrity wasn't okay in practice and the efforts that we put in. And so I was fortunate, at 7, 8, 9 to get a coach like that to teach me about organized sports, and not like, if you got a trophy, you earned it. It wasn't given to you. So that was, again, it validates what we're saying is, my experiences have really helped that.
yeah. I also want to say, with the US college system, college is a viable route into professional tennis, but also gives you a safety net where the rest of the world doesn't always look at it like that. I mean, we all know South Americans that turn pro out of middle school, and they're just like, my future is tennis or nothing. When you have that all or nothing mentality, of course, you're going to keep playing even if you're living out of your car. Same thing with Europe. The other thing with Europe is the prize money events can keep you going. Club tennis can keep you going, if you're local there. So there are a lot of factors involved there, not just the US like mentality, but I want to go off on the rest of the world and their structures. So
But we also I haven't experienced it, right? I've never experienced the European culture? Do I think that, I don't know if, hey, our kids in Europe or other locations, are they as soft as the kids are here in the US because everything is given right away and it's not earned? And I don't know, man,
Well,
that's a whole nother topic, right? That's a whole
well,
other.
That
it-
individual basis of, like within the country. I mean, I grew up with Francis here. Francis had it tough, and he worked hard and got ahead. He lived at the tennis center and, got his reps in, and that's in the US. So it depends where you
But he also had to do it, right? He had no other choice. That was his way, kind of what Jay was saying before, like that was his way out, right? There weren't any
was
other
his way
options. It was all in.
One, it was his way out, but two, there were coaches that recognized his talent and invested in him over a long period of time, which helped foster that talent. I think if
But
he
what
didn't,
made him talented?
yeah, the work.
no, I mean, that's a good comparison between him and his twin brother. So,
But
you
what was
know,
but again, so what? Yeah, but what's that?
Well, who
What's
wanted it
that?
more?
What's
Who loved
that
it? Who was willing
difference?
to work? So
Yeah,
that's the
who?
other thing too is, you can have two people in the exact same environment, but one's personality fits and the other one doesn't, and it might not have anything to do with talent. Like it might
But then
just
is
have to
that
do
just
with,
genetics?
but his personality talent.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Are we going to get down to that? Like, is your talent what you love?
This is in tennis related, and this could be that my mom just loves me and cares about me. But my mom said she goes, I remember you were always just the sweetest boy, even as a baby. You always cared about other people.
You're
She
still
was
a
like, thanks, Pat. I try to be a sweetheart, I try. But she was like, ever since, so this is interesting, right? She was like, ever since you were a kid, even as a baby, she was like, you always were so kind and cared about other people. She was like, you were always so sweet from the youngest age. So do I think that we're born with, genetically, are we born with certain things over others? Obviously there's introverts and extroverts, right? Who's more successful in tennis, introverted people or extroverted people? People with bigger personalities, does that affect their game? That's all other fun conversations. So
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Pat, what were you told as a kid? Were you a sweet?
I was told I suck and I need to work harder. I was told it's never good enough. So, but
so how do we close this up? What's the
thought real quick? My thought real quick is
final thoughts, and then it's dinner time for me.
Yeah, my final thought is no, JY, I think you're correct. You can outwork whatever situation you're in. It doesn't matter kind of what hand you're dealt to a degree. You can be successful however you want to define success. And let's keep it as vague as possible there.
I'm going to have my final thoughts, and then JY, we're going to let you finish up since since you were the host of the night for this. So my final opinion, this is something that I've spoken on, where I genuinely believe that everybody has something great about them, but unfortunately not everybody is going to have the opportunity to tap into that and explore it, right? I think everyone has something great. We all do. But not everybody, maybe has the means, or not everybody has that passion and willingness to be able to search for that or fight for that. So again, as do I, JY, I agree with you. I think that there isn't a natural talent. I think that everybody is born with something, but not everybody is willing to explore that talent, and not everybody is willing to do that. And like we said, and Pat said, some people, yes, might have their starting position might be a little bit ahead of somebody else because of money or opportunity. But then it comes down to, is that person willing to do everything they possibly can to close that gap and not let that no longer be an issue? So
Well, I'll just finish off with, I think parents, I don't think coaches do this as much, but parents, just do your best to not label your kids as good at something or not good at something, or you're talented at something and you're not talented at this. Like, just let them do it, right? And you don't have to, don't praise their results, praise their efforts,
Yeah, that's
and
really well said.
and
Agree.
let them grow. And as long as they're becoming a good person and they're learning how to work hard and they're learning how to treat others well, then whether they succeed with whatever goal they wrote, right? Not what you wrote, parents, it's what they wrote down. Even if they don't make that goal, but they did those other things, they're a success, right? And so let them go on that
Agreed.
journey. Let them find out who they are and where they end up. And that's it. Don't put them in something just because you think they're good at it. Put them in something because they want to be there.
Well said.
That was, yeah, that was really well said, because that actually, those words impacted me, JY, because I think that's an important thing that I kind of went through too. I create your own success, right? And if it's supported, if somebody has an interest in something, let them explore it and not force it. So really well said.
Even if we think it's a little weird, I mean, who would have thought gaming would turn into what it is now? And these metaverses and the virtual worlds, like,
It's crazy.
it's a legit thing, and there's a lot of people making a career out of it, right? And so,
What did you say?
Is that, are you going to bring up Fortnite again?
I told, in my head, I'm like, don't say Fortnite, don't say Fortnite.
God, I love Fortnite. My
Man,
girlfriend makes fun of me for it, but I love Fortnite.
How far are you? Do you have a battle pass, Chris?
Bro, do I have a battle pass? Of course I got the battle pass. Oh man. Well, on that note, I think the closing comment is our advice would be, you want to be a pro Fortnite gamer? It's not natural talent. You got to put in the reps, as always, right? So got to get it in. But all right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up here. As always, JY, Pat, thank you. Gary, we missed you. We know you're having a blast in France, and you will catch us next week on our next episode. For everybody watching, hopefully you all found this interesting for us to discuss this. I know for me, the conversation along the way made me think, right? It made me think about that whole naturally talented. I'm probably guilty of saying that at some point, but so hopefully everybody found this informative. And JY, thanks for the topic. And if you guys have any questions, go for it. Pat, tell them what to do, or JY, tell them what to do. Like and subscribe, comment. But again, thank you guys, and we will see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Later. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Bye.